Happy midweek to everybody. Hope you had a good Easter weekend. We certainly did, despite the circumstances being different than usual. Um, but here it is, the middle of the week, and I wanted to share some thoughts that were kind of spurred by a lot of things I've been thinking about. But this weekend, my family and I were watching a show about the life of Jesus. And in one of the scenes, it showed how a leper came up to Jesus and asked to be healed, and Jesus healed him. We read about that in Matthew chapter 8. It says, Jesus came down from the mountainside, and large crowds were following him. And a man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And so Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. I am willing, he said, be clean. And immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Leprosy wasn't just a disease, it was a sign that you were unclean because what you had could be given to somebody else and cause them to be sick as well. And it was a matter of just feeling like you were dirty and feeling like you were second class citizen. In fact, is not even second class, but at like a millionth class. It was like the worst thing in the world to have leprosy. There's another time that Jesus healed about 10 of them. I read about in Luke 17. Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance, and he called out in a loud voice. They said, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, Go, show yourself to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. You know, it was the priest who was kind of like the minister of health during that day. And the priest could say whether you were healthy, clean, or unhealthy, not clean. It's interesting that in the first situation, one leper appears in a huge crowd of people. And of course, the crowd must have scattered to get out of his way because they didn't want to be anywhere near him. They were definitely putting the 6 foot rule or even more into place then. But in the other situation, there were 10 of them, but they stood off to a distance and called out to Jesus. So it's kind of interesting, the dynamics there, what was going on at the time. In the Old Testament, we read about a Syrian military commander named Naaman who had leprosy. And he went to the prophet Elisha to see about getting healed, which he was when he took the steps that Elisha gave to him. Over the last month or so, I've thought quite a few times, I almost feel like we all have leprosy. I mean, we move to the other side of the street when we're out walking, so we don't have to pass somebody too closely. We're watching our social distancing. We do a lot of waving and yelling at each other from far away. We don't know whether somebody else could be infected or we're infected and could be spreading it. And so we are definitely taking all the precautions we can. During Bible times, leprosy was a disease that required distance. Biblical leprosy, it was kind of a general term. It may not mean that everybody who had leprosy in the Bible had what we know as Hansen's disease or what we know as modern leprosy. Some may have, but leprosy was more of a common term that meant any kind of terrible skin disease that you would have, something that you would have that might be able to pass on to other people and that would make you unclean and unhealthy. If we're talking about real leprosy, though, it's a very terrible disease. It's one where it damages the nervous system to the extent that it causes all kind of bodily harm. It can cause blindness, numbness to parts of the body, skin discoloration, scaly and scabby skin, unhealable sores, decaying skin, which produces a terrible smell, and changes to the voice, the vocal cords, to make it very raspy. If your nerves aren't working, especially when your hands and your feet, areas that we use our extremities a lot, cuts and burns can bring injury and infection and deformity to the parts of the body. Imagine, and this actually happens to people who have a leprosy in certain parts of the world, imagine waking up in the morning and finding that while you were sleeping, a rat had just gnawed off your finger. Yeah, you didn't feel it, so you didn't know it happened. It's a very terrible, terrible, terrible disease. And leprosy can spread through multiple touching or possibly airborne as well. So lepers were to be avoided at all cost. If you became a leper back in Bible times, and even today, you were taken away from the rest of society and put into isolation. And maybe lepers could live together because they already had the disease, but and we've done that today with leper colonies in different parts of the world. But leprosy meant that you were cut off from everybody and everything. And that was a very terrible, terrible way to live, besides the physical problems, the social problems that were there. They were true social outcasts, even way more than we are with this COVID-19 virus. But Jesus loved the lepers. Jesus reached out, he touched and he healed. He he went beyond what the social norm was to be able to bring his love and acceptance to them. God has compassion on those that are lonely, those that are rejected, those that are ill, those that are dying. God has a special way of reaching out to them. And we see that even the way that he reached out to the lepers. God's presence for some people who are in those terrible categories of life, maybe that's the only thing going for them, is that they have the presence of God because everybody else has deserted them. In times of old, leprosy and any form of skin disease, they didn't have cures for them. They weren't treatable and they were transmittable. COVID-19 is difficult to cure and it's very hit and miss on how it gets passed around. But what we can gain through our modern leprosy is that we know now what it's like to be alone. We know what it's like to feel a little bit like a social outcast. A little bit, not totally. And this has only been going on a month. We don't know how much longer it's going to go on, but we do know a little bit what it's like to be cut off from the rest of the world. Even if you're home and you're with other people, then you're still cut off from the rest of society. And some of you are home literally alone 24 hours a day, day after day after day. And that's a very difficult time of loneliness as well. Even if you're going to work every day, everybody's maintaining some distance. I assume that break times aren't near as compatible with one another as it used to be. Everybody goes off and does their own thing. And if you're even out shopping, you've maybe been to the grocery store, and the couple times I've been there, I know that everybody's really quiet and they're quickly getting everything on their list. And there's a strange eye contact that even strangers have with each other. It's kind of like saying, I'm sorry that I'm sharing the space with you, and believe me, I'm going to do everything I can to not cause any harm to you. And I don't want you to have any harm to me, and we're going to get through this. And there's just this weird look that we give each other, and we're all thinking the same thing, aren't we? Wow. So when this is over with, I think one of the things we can learn is let's be sensitive to the needs of other people that are marginalized, those that are lonely, those that are alone, those that really need companionship and attention and human connection. There's some people who kind of live like this all the time for various reasons. For some reason, they're not included. Maybe they're ostracized. Maybe they're different. Maybe they don't quite fit in, or they have life circumstances. Maybe they're old and they're homebound, or they are ill a lot and they don't have the ability to get out and do all the things with people that they used to do. And so maybe we can think about how we can love even some of the unlovable in our lives, or the ones that we easily forget about. We all have lepers in our own lives, people that could use a touch, could use a hug, could use a healing, could use an invitation, and just to make life more worthy and meaningful for them. Someday, sooner or later, our social distancing is going to pass, and we're going to come out from the shells of our safe homes, and we're going to find one another again. But I hope that we don't totally go back to normal, back to normal. Hopefully, we're going to take the lessons we've learned during this crisis that have shaped us, and we're going to emerge better than normal. Not back to normal, but better than normal. I want to coin that because I think that's something we really need to work on. There's maybe some impressions and some things we've learned through this time when life came to a standstill that we want to take into whatever chapter comes next, so that we can go better than what normal is in our preconceived ideas. And so I would say, take the things you're learning, the things you're experiencing, the sensations and the new experiences that we're having, if we need to, write them down and say, this is how I want my life to be different when this is over with. Let's take those things and let's make it better than normal, including reaching out to those that are lonely and alone, those that don't have that human connection, because we need it so badly, because that human connection is also a God connection, because God, through us, connects him with one another. And I believe that our faith is going to be able to transform us from the inside out and make us better than normal. Have a great rest of the week.